Hi everyone, it's Maureen Taylor, the photo detective, and I know it's like 3:30 in the afternoon Eastern time, and I'm jumping on a live, and you're thinking, what is she doing? How could she possibly be on at this time? But I am, because I want to talk about my new podcast episode, which is based on this book, Visualizing Equality. I interviewed the author, Aston Gonzalez, and it was a fascinating conversation. We talked about African American 19th century photographers and how they use the medium of photography and the symbolism in photographs to, to basically broadcast a message. And it's really, really interesting. I actually couldn't put this book down. It is a nonfiction, of course. And I hope you'll give my new podcast episode a listen. It's called Visualizing Equality. And it's clues in 19th century photographs, particularly mid-19th century photographs. And so these African-American photographers photographed Black and white advocates for suffrage and abolition. And then some of these images were printed and then passed out. But we also talk about other types of images that were available in that period and who was collecting them. And we talked about some interesting collections of images. I really, really enjoyed talking with Aston, and of course his book is available on Amazon. But I stumbled across it. It was one of the book recommendations for me, and I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. So I picked it up, and let me just tell you a little bit about it. Obviously, he teaches. He is assistant professor of history at Salisbury University. Let me see what we've got here. I've got all these underlined things everywhere in the book. There's an introduction about how pictures can be used for these purposes and what he learned and what I learned from him. It's pretty amazing. I hope you'll check it out. Maybe if you don't want to purchase it, your public library will have it. Oops, and of course there's my phone. Let me get that off. And so he talks about Robert Douglas and activism in Philadelphia. There are all kinds of the images before photography, but during the photographic era of slavery. And of course, I did a book a long time ago called on runaway advertisements. And so we talked about a little bit about the representation of individuals in those advertisements, but also how they were then promoted in these images. So I'm trying to find one for you, which of course I can't find because we're live. But anyway, it is, for instance, here's Abby Kelly Foster. She was a well-known abolitionist, and it is after a daguerreotype. So often people would sit for daguerreotypes, well-known people, and then they would become engravings or lithographs. And sometimes it's pretty clear because it mentions when an image is printed that it's from a daguerreotype, and other times it is not. But you can sometimes tell whether or not that was part of it. One of my favorite photographers is Augustus Washington of the state of Connecticut. And a lot of his images, they did an exhibit a number of years ago at the Connecticut Historical Society, and we talked about that. Augustus Washington is obviously mentioned right here. These are stunning daguerreotypes. And so anyway, I hope you'll check it out. Anybody have any questions for me today while I'm just popping on here live for just a few minutes? It's pretty hot here today. Probably the same as you, where you are. It's hot sort of all over the country. The Ball and Thomas studio There's just some absolutely beautiful photographs in this book, and then he talks about how they're used and what they're used for. So check it out. I thought it was a really interesting read. Visualizing equality. Listen to this week's podcast episode, and you'll get to hear this conversation I had with Aston. I hope he writes another book. And I gave him some resources to follow up on as well. Some things that people told me about. Talk to you later. Hope you have a good day. Stay cool.